2014 was a good year for horror games, and in this video I'd like to look back at my favorite ones. Keep in mind, this list is purely opinion based and I've judged the games solely about how I feel about them, so the picks I have might be completely different from other lists. If a game isn't on the list, it's either because I haven't played it or because I simply don't feel the same way about it. Here's a short list of horror games I didn't play, so they won't be on the list. Let's not waste any more time and start the list. Number 10. Outlast Whistleblower. I can't say Outlast is one of the most original horror games I've played in the last years, neither is it one of the scariest ones. The narrative is rather predictable, as are the moments when the monsters will pop up, but what Outlast did impressively well is the gameplay and atmosphere. Most of the game revolves around avoiding monsters by predicting their movement and using the environment. The environments keep changing, however, requiring you to use different approaches, keeping the game fresh from start to finish even when I knew the monster was coming. There is a ton of detail added to the environment and characters, making the atmosphere very dark and disturbing. In the DLC Whistleblower, they used the very same elements that made the original interesting and added another layer of disturbing to it. Like I said, in the original Outlast, it was rather predictable when the enemies would show up. In Whistleblower, however, they caught me by surprise multiple times, and it has probably one of the creepiest monsters I've seen in a while. Overall, I had a lot of fun playing both the original game and Whistleblower, but Whistleblower was just a little bit better. Number 9. Bunker 16. Bunker 16 is a free-to-play short horror game. If you don't know anything about the game, I wouldn't want to spoil you about the later part of the game, because Bunker 16 is all about build-up, all about atmosphere, and all about story. It's actually one of the most clever build-ups I've seen in any free-to-play horror game. It doesn't give a detailed story with logical explanations, but it does play with your expectations. It messes with your mind and it can get so unpredictable that I was startled even when nothing was happening. All I want to say is, you're in a bunker and you need to find a way out. If you like horror games and haven't played this one, I say check it out because it's worth the try. Number 8. Phobia 1.5 Fear of the Darkness. Next to Bunker 16, Phobia 1.5 has the best build-up I've seen in a free-to-play horror game. Some of the arguments that explain why I think it's better than Bunker 16 would require me to spoil a bit, but like Bunker 16, I don't want to spoil too much. But what I can say is that Phobia has a more logical story. It's one of the few horror game scenarios where the character's reaction to what happened didn't feel out of place. Of course, the story exists because of a series of unfortunate events, but to me, nothing felt too forced or far-fetched like most games in its genre. It doesn't throw you into a disturbing situation right away. Instead, it gives you the time to get to know the place, explore the world and understand the world's logic. Even that can be pretty scary since it's rather unpredictable when something's going to happen. The only complaint I have is that, and I know it's a personal problem, you're not able to change the controls. I'm born with one arm. This isn't a problem in games unless I'm not able to change the controls. If I want to run, I need to let go of the mouse, giving me a huge disadvantage in trying to beat the game. But besides that, I had a lot of fun. Great atmosphere, great build-up, and free to play. I'm looking forward to the next Phobia, Fear of the Unknown. Number 7. Neverending Nightmares. I already gave a more in-depth review on my channel, but to sum it up shortly, Neverending Nightmares is a psychological horror game with a dark and disturbing atmosphere, making you feel paranoid and disoriented. Just when you think the game starts to get repetitive and it starts to lose its scariness, it throws something new at you, keeping the scares fresh. The story is a little vague, but for a reason, to leave it open to interpretation. The game is rather short to beat, but it has a total of 3 endings that are all different and worth a playthrough. Overall, due to its repetitiveness and low difficulty, it can lose some of its strength, but when the game is strong, it keeps you on edge. Number 6. Dreadout. In Dreadout, you solve puzzles and fight monsters with a camera function on the protagonist's smartphone. If you use the camera, she walks slower, but most monsters are only visible through the camera, keeping you on guard throughout the entire game. The ratings of Dreadout were all over the place, usually something between 3 and 7. I can't deny I understand why this game would drive a lot of people away. The story is laughably awful since every single horror movie cliché and stereotype is thrown at you. Some of the puzzles are damn hard, making you search every corner of the world. Some people may find the jump scares cheap, and it has probably the worst game over penalty system I've seen in any horror game ever. But with exception of the game over penalty system, none of those things really bothered me. The jump scares only happen when you're doing something wrong, so it felt like a decent penalty to me. Puzzles are hard but very satisfying once completed, and the story is so bad it actually made me laugh most of the time, and it didn't take the scariness away. And that's what Dreadout does best. It creates a very scary, dark and unpredictable world. I dare even call it one of the scariest games I've played so far. It's because of the cleverly designed world and monsters I didn't get bored exploring the world and fighting the enemies. It's even the first game to make me scare quit on camera.
No!
Like I said, the only big problem I have is when you lose. If you lose, you get stuck in a place called limbo, forcing you to walk a long distance before continuing the game. At first the distance is short, but the more you lose, the more torturously long it can get, ruining the game's balance. If you're interested in Dreadout and think you can look past all the downsides, I'd say give it a try. Number 5. Five Nights at Freddy's. You know I had to mention this somewhere on the list. Five Nights at Freddy's has probably one of the most original and clever settings I've seen in a horror game in 2014. The idea of robots that are made for the entertainment of children wandering around after the place closes, killing you if they spot you, is pretty damn creepy. Instead of wandering around and collecting items, you need to study their movements with security cameras and make sure you use your power wisely. At first, I considered Five Nights at Freddy's to be one of the scariest games I've played, but unfortunately the game gets repetitive and loses most of its scariness around night 3 and 4. The game is also rather difficult since it relies on luck for a big part. You can perform well just to be cornered and forced to use your power to the point of losing. Even with that in mind, I had a lot of fun playing the game due to its original setting and gameplay. Even some of the game theories are pretty damn interesting. It shows just how much thought and effort has been put into making the game. Number 4. Five Nights at Freddy's 2. Not long after the first was released, the second game was released, and to be honest, I thought it was going to be a bad game. I was afraid it was just going to be a recycled version of the first with different 3D models, but to my surprise it actually made some good changes. In the first game you only had to focus on your sides and on Foxy in order to win. In the new one, however, there's a ton of things going on at once. You have the music box you need to rewind regularly, you have a mask that you need to use on certain monsters, a flashlight you need to flash at certain monsters, audio cues play an essential part into beating the game, and instead of 4 there are around 10 monsters you need to keep an eye on, plus some hidden characters that I don't know much about. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 dives more into the story, and after seeing the game theorist video about the meaning of the story, I have to say I'm very impressed in just how much thought went into making the games. However, the game still suffers from needing luck to win. Skill is necessary, I'm not gonna lie about that. But you don't want to know how many times I died because I had to rewind the music box but wasn't able to because the damn balloon boy just wouldn't leave. Sometimes he goes away after putting on the mask, sometimes he hangs around for a while. It's a matter of luck. Part 1 is hard but doable, but in part 2 I'm stuck at the 5th night and it feels impossible. It's more fun to play, but due to its high difficulty, it's simply too frustrating to beat, the 5th night at least. Nevertheless, both games are still games I'd recommend trying the demo of. Number 3. Alien Isolation. What Alien Isolation does very well is the alien itself and the excellent build-up. This is the only Alien game I've played that manages to capture a big part of the atmosphere of the first movie. The alien truly feels like a dangerous threat that you should avoid at all costs due to its instant kill and high movement speed. Another thing I love is the amount of detail that went into the design. Based on environment design, the game looks amazing and feels just like the first movie. However, to me it also has a big downside. The gameplay is rather repetitive and not always rewarding. The gameplay mostly revolves around fighting objects in order to go to the next room. Since you're constantly looking for similar objects in similar environments, it just feels repetitive and I found myself bored every now and then. Still, the game does its best to change the layout of every environment you visit, keeping you on guard with each area you enter. It's not always very clear where you're supposed to go, so I often had to walk a couple of circles before moving along. Aside from that, it's a horror game thick with atmosphere. If you're a fan of the original movie and like horror games, this is something worth checking out. Number 2. The Evil Within. The Evil Within has some major ups and downs. The things it does well are amazing, but it falls short on multiple parts, taking away a lot of what could have made it a fantastic game. What does the game do well? The gameplay, atmosphere, and design. This is one of the darkest, brutal, and goriest games I've ever played. It easily has the best monster designs I've seen in horror games this year, as well as impressive and varied level designs. Especially that damn Laura character creeps the hell out of me. The way she moves, the sound she makes, she's just... ugh. While I can't say it's really scary since most of the time I had enough ammo to defeat the monsters, the gameplay is very fun and challenging. Every time I lost, I got better once I retried, and defeating a difficult boss or difficult level is pretty damn satisfying. What does the game fall short on? The story. I'm not going to lie, I hate the story. The characters are very bland and emotionless Hollywood stereotypes that only talk in exposition. The story jumps all over the place. First, I thought what was happening was actually happening in the world the game describes. Then I thought it took place in the protagonist's head, then in another character's head, then in a matrix. But the characters were so dull it didn't matter what was happening to them anyway. Other downsides aren't as big or common. Sometimes the close camera made it harder to see around you. Sometimes I wasn't able to jump on a ledge, requiring me to spam the space button for a couple of seconds, and hitting enemies is harder than your average shooter due to a pretty wonky aim. To sum it up shortly, the game is challenging, has variation, looks amazing, but has a bad story, and often the controls don't work as smoothly as you want them to. Shit. But as a survivor horror game, it was still worth the time. Now, the number 1 on the list is a game that didn't get extraordinarily positive reviews, didn't get fan hype, isn't very long or challenging, but to me, it's simply the best horror game of the year. Number 1. Among the Sleep. Like I said, Among the Sleep isn't very long. In fact, I've beaten the game in one playthrough of about 2 hours. But Among the Sleep isn't about quantity, it's about quality. It's as long as it needs to be, never falling short nor overstaying its welcome. With almost every game in the list, there were parts that are less interesting, parts that took you out of the immersion or were a bit too frustrating. Among the Sleep literally had me on edge from start to finish. It never bored me for even a second. It probably has one of the most clever uses of narrative and most excellent atmosphere I've seen in any horror game. You play as a baby and see the world through the eyes of a baby, and in a strange way the game actually makes you experience the same feeling the baby has. For example, your mom is a big guardian angel that enlightens the entire room, and if she leaves, the environments turn dark and it creates an unease. Hugging your teddy enlightens the part around you, and since the game is so full of dark areas, it legitimately makes you feel safe whenever the teddy is near. The gameplay is rather easy. Pick up objects, place them somewhere and avoid threats. But the environments keep changing throughout the entire game, making every place you go to interesting to walk through, and the build-up is so excellent it's hard to predict when a threat is coming. The story isn't the kind of story that explains everything in the most logical way. This may drive some people off with the ending. But personally, I think the game gives you enough information to make the ending believable, and I think it's a perfect way to end the game. I guess the only nitpick I have is that 3D objects regularly cross each other's collision, making your hand or teddy partly stuck in a wall or object you grab. But it's never game-breaking or something so awful that it gets you out of the immersion, at least nothing I faced during my playthrough. Among the Sleep is one of my personal favorite horror games of the last few years, and if you like horror games, I would definitely recommend you check it out when the price isn't too high. So that was my top 10 horror games of 2014. Did I overlook some horror games, or are there some great horror games you'd recommend? Let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed my list and thanks for watching.